Hi. No square around my face. Let's review. Dr. Russell Blakely's central thesis is this is a disorder that causes a great deal of problems. It's a developmental delay in which people who are in this population of ADHD have a 2 to 3 year delay in the growth and development of certain brain structures, and that the brains in those structures are 3 to 10% smaller in those individuals. So this is his point of physiological psychophysiology. So that's his central point on that. Now, I've done this various reading since after watching that video, and I had learned a great deal about how this stuff actually plays out. We talked in the last video about how it's neural networks, not regions, and how new studies are just now beginning to be done to reflect this new understanding of how cognition is actually occurring. I'm rendering kind of the old stuff a little bit moot, unfortunately. But regardless, the point is that we're looking at some limited actual evidence about brain differences. But note this, and it's important. A couple of things. One of the aspects that manifests as a symptom in ADHD is this phenomenon of, I forget which one it is. Fuck. Anyway, I forget which one it is, but one of the articles I read said that has to do with this sheath that's around something, and it wears down over the course of your life. And so as it gets thinner, you become more settled in that area. And that, in that regard, the ADHD mind, that's too thick. It's too built up, right? There's other indicators that, in fact, it is a delay. Except it's not actually a delay, okay? This is the thing. They call it a delay because you're developing more slowly than the average person. Your brain is. It's developing more slowly. So, in fact, those qualities of decision making, those aspects of self-control, of self-monitoring, of emotional self-monitoring, of emotional self-repression, those are later developing for somebody who has ADHD. And some other notes to think about this, though. Number one, slower developing is not in and of itself a bad thing. So if I have a plant that takes a longer time to grow, a tree that takes a longer time to grow versus a tree that takes a shorter time to grow, there's nothing wrong with the tree that takes a longer time to grow, right? Okay, so there's that. And yet, we're calling it a disorder. He does say it's a developmental delay, but everything else in that video is about etiologies, symptoms, actual real-world utilitarian harms, and significance of dealing with this problem, reference to it as a problem. So, for the most part, it's definitely being considered a disorder. But as I said, just the first point, which is speed of growth is not relate to a disorder because we need to keep in mind the two different kinds of metrics we have. One which compares against a standard, one of which compares relationally. Okay, so the tree thing we've just discussed. That's the issue of speed of growth. But it's not just speed of growth. We do see strong evidentiary correlations between a certain population of people and behaviors that you might call poor decision making, lack of follow through, unreliability, poor sense of themselves and time. Is it a disorder? Well, I think the psychology community would probably say it's a disorder if it's causing problems in that person's life. That and the default position, the default assumption underlying that notion is that the world is as it is, and each individual, if functioning optimally, is in a non-adversarial relationship with the world, so that the individual who is functioning optimally is mostly happy, they're satisfied and hardworking and reliable and attentive and all those various other things. And when the world causes them difficulties, they discover ways to solve those problems and work around them, and that's their primary focus is outcomes. So one of the big differences you'll see in general between different voices in the abstraction community are the predominant influences of TE and TI. Now, Dr. Russell Blakely is somebody who's doing TE in a very excellent way. He's executing all sorts of protocols. He followed this one population of ADHD people for 27 years, learning about the persistence of the disorder into adulthood. He talked about the many methodology challenges faced by this unique bundle of executive decision functions and working memory functions and the ways in which language control behavior. And we know it's a single population of people because they share certain similarities in brain development speed, and we know that a lot of people have problems with people who have ADD or ADHD. I keep doing that, but ADHD, and that people who have ADHD self-report plenty of problems. So, okay, there's lots of reasons there why we might want to consider it a disorder, provided we accept the legitimacy of the TE structured understanding of life attainment. So, my friend David Porter is not ADHD at all, in any sense of the word. And he's also not somebody who achieves on a concrete ENTJ kind of way at all. He does not do a whole hell of a lot. But I consider him a fully successful, happy, healthy person. He does play a lot of music, and he seems like be one of the more happy and just sort of together, mentally, spiritually together people I know. He's sober. Been sober for a long ass time, like 20 years or something. And been with the same woman for a long time, and it's just good. But he has a problem following through on stuff, doesn't he, Eric? No. He follows through on a couple of things. He just makes very few commitments. And when he does, he follows through for sure. He's very reliable. But he's also not terribly productive, if you value that. So, right away, we understand that the pathologization, I guess, of prioritizations is probably representative of type bias more than anything else. Because look, he says things like they are insufficiently able to string together planned steps of behavior to accomplish a goal. Well, okay. Are you sure? Are you sure about that? Whose goals are you measuring? Now, with children, we know you're measuring not the children's goals. You're measuring the teacher's goals and the parents' goals. I'm pretty sure pretty soon, as the teachers and the parents are making it abundantly clear to this child that that's not okay. You cannot be you. You need to be somebody else. As they are warping the identity of this human being with their behaviors, their awfulness, the human being is going to internalize that and actually start to display a lot of that stuff. Now, I don't like this argument in general. I've heard it. I used to make this argument a lot about AA and stuff, that the only reason people were alcoholics is because they believed in alcoholism, and that in fact there's no rational explanation for no rational defense of the notion that alcoholics are powerless over alcohol. And I still agree there's no rational defense for it. So the thing is, when we're talking about ADHD as a disorder, we are necessarily, unavoidably talking about behavior that deviates from a social norm in a way that causes some conflict, in childhood especially, in non-consensual relationships especially. So my first thought is, okay, there's the problem. Let's get rid of that problem first, because you can't even do any experiments in anything until and unless you stop the coercion. If you're coercing somebody to do stuff they don't like, there's only one sane response. Right? So, you're talking about let's find techniques to more effectively coerce individuals into paradigms that aren't suitable for them. And your framing of this thing as a disorder necessarily means that the problem are those individuals who don't adequately ascribe to protocol-driven frameworks to satisfy your sense of order. I've heard from Enid F. Patterson that Homeboy is an ENTJ. Well, Homeboy is an ENTJ who also, unfortunately, hasn't been checked by adequate TI. He's practiced it. He's really good at it. Within the service of TE only. He doesn't ever actually challenge any of the obvious contradictions in what he's saying. He doesn't really get down there and say, "Oh, I get it. The reason why I keep having to make all these little exceptions and adjustments and changes and is because the whole fucking idea is garbage." So what happens when you don't prioritize consistency and you instead prioritize outcomes? So homie is Barry Util, right? Is Util all the way. He's like, well, we know it's a disorder because it's causing harms. Well, what do you mean? Well, look, these kids aren't doing well in school. We know there's something wrong with those kangaroos. We tossed them in the ocean. They don't seem to be doing very well. Are you sure maybe there's not something wrong with you tossing them in the ocean rather than something wrong with the kangaroos? So that's one of my main points here, is that the things that are being used as evidence of there being a problem are not evidence of a problem. Okay, so that's a big problem for him. They're evidence of a problem. They're evidence of another problem on his end with his TE bullshit. All right, now let's talk about this other thing. So, first of all, the reality is more slowly developing cognitive elements, be they agents of whatever sort, like elephants and stuff or dolphins or whatever, the smarter they are, the more slowly they develop. It's true within species as well as between species. So why would you call the most advanced brains disordered? Yours finished quickly. Yours was done cooking soon, yes. That's why you don't understand this, I guess. So, let's talk again about another way of interpreting the same data that he's interpreted as a disorder. Okay, so in an advanced brain, we see a different ratio of proportions between the regions, so that certain regions that have more to do with real incisive intelligence and effectiveness in terms of comprehension, not just execution, that those regions there are larger relationally in terms of ratio to these other 5 regions over here that are smaller, because they're reduced importance, obviously, in a more advanced kind of cognition that we normal people have. Now, for the sluggish cognition of people afflicted with this disorder called, we keep bouncing between names. It's so hard to decide. But we've decided to call it, at this moment, I think we're going with, we're going to call it crawl-think. Crawl-think disorder. These individuals are unable to think on their feet. They've got to come into preparation. It's tragic seeing it in action, really. Any of the normal people in the room can throw them off in a second. They just have to throw one little argument out there and they're completely lost. Why? Because if they haven't prepped out for everything in advance, they can't come up with any ideas on the spot. I know, it's really inconceivable to us normal brains. We can't think of a world in which we wouldn't be able to use that part of our ability to think. But disabled people who don't have that strength have a disorder. And so I think the best thing we can do for them is to just take advantage of their natural bovine cooperativeness and to enable them to, take their time. They're going to take about 5 times as long to learn anything, of course, because they're very slow. That We need to make lots of accommodations for you fuckers. Dr. Russell Blakely. Listen, mister. I'm demoting you to mister. Yep. You're Mr. Russell Blakely now. That's what you get for being so wrong. I called the medical board. I said, Mr. Russell Blakely, he's not saying anything of any value at all. So I'm taking his doctor. I'm taking the letter in D and R away from him. And, yeah. He says, okay, well, it's a complex web of all of these different fucking things. And there's also this whole array of social aspects, too. So there's 4 different genetic aspects to it and 4 different social aspects to it. And each of those has a bunch of different little sort of things that are kind of related to it, and that ties into some of the population shows this, and some of the population shows this, and you see in all the papers like, now, of course, one of the challenges is to account for all this heterogeneity. You're not talking about anything. That's how you account for it. The reason there's so much heterogeneity is because it's not a disorder. It's called being smarter than you. I don't have patience for bullshit. I feel you, Lacey. I know. Can you believe that fucker? Telling me I got a disorder? Russell Blakely, your mom's face has a disorder. It's called you. You're a disorder. You don't even know how to love. You don't. That's what you get for having FI in the 4th slot. I'd rather have it in the 7th. Yeah. Talk about you, Russell Blakely. The only way you can conceive of yourself even existing is by the completion of protocols. Because you have SI in the 7th. You don't even think you exist. You don't exist. You fail to observe yourself out of quantum superposition. That's why, Russell Blakely. That's why. I want to go to one of your symposiums, and you are so confident up there, aren't you? Aren't you, little mister? You're confidently spewing all that bullshit. I looked at the fucking research. I went on Google Scholar. I did the research. That's completely fucking bullshit, everything you say. It's not a disorder. It's like, it's just ridiculous. Just because most people are born with scoliosis doesn't make the straight-spined people. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with the straight-spined people. All right? The impatience is there for a reason. ADHD means low tolerance for bullshit. Low tolerance for bullshit. That's what it means first and foremost. And that might manifest as impatience and waiting. Poor emotional self-regulation. Well, I don't like waiting. It's the fact that you just think like there's something wrong with you because you don't bend over and take it hard enough is ridiculous. There's something wrong with you, Russell Blakely. You bend over constantly. You do both parts of this. You do the bending and you do the thrusting. In this metaphor, I do neither, sir. Okay, well, I'm doing a little bit of the thrusting right now. But you totally deserve it for being so wrong. And like ontologically violent. You're being ontologically violent against my people. Don't listen to that fucker, Enid F. Patterson. That's all bullshit.